Begin mission log. Standard date 7432.89. I, Professor Krill, Chief Xenobiologist of the Galactic Research Institute, am leading Expedition Earth 774, a routine survey of a negligible Class 3 planet in a forgettable solar system. Professor Krill's voice echoed through the command deck of the research vessel Enlightened Discovery as he absently flicked through holographic representations of Earth's creatures. His 4 eye stalks barely registered interest as images of tigers, sharks, and eagles floated by. Simply primitive, he muttered, his superior tone carrying through the ship's communication system. Another tedious cataloging mission of rudimentary life forms. I expect nothing of scientific value. Behind him, junior researcher Quark nervously adjusted his atmospheric processor. Unlike the other 7 members of the research team, all decorated scientists with dozens of cataloged planets to their credit, this was Quark's first field mission. And unlike his colleagues, he'd actually spent the mandatory 500 hours studying Earth's ecological database. Professor, Quark ventured, his voice oscillating slightly with nervousness, I've noticed some concerning patterns in Earth's fauna that might warrant additional safety protocols. Safety protocols? Professor Krill's eye stalks swiveled simultaneously toward Quark, a clear sign of irritation in their species. For a planet where the apex predators can't even survive basic radiation, where creatures still use lungs and blood? Please. Science Officer Zeem, whose gelatinous form was currently occupying a hovering containment field designed for aquatic researchers, burbled in agreement. My scans indicate Earth's oceans contain 95% water. The remaining 5% consists primarily of sodium chloride and primitive vertebrates. Hardly a challenge. Researcher Blorm, whose exoskeleton clicked with each confident stride, examined the deployment map. I've selected the continent designated Australia for my research zone. The database suggests it's an isolated evolutionary laboratory perfect for observing simple adaptation patterns. Quark's copper-colored skin blanched to a pale yellow. Actually, Blorm, Australia contains some of the most. Team. Interrupted Professor Krill, deployment commences in 30-time units. Prepare your individual research pods and remember this is merely a formality mission. The Galactic Research Council requires documentation of all habitable planets, no matter how insignificant. Earth's wildlife is nothing the most junior researcher couldn't handle alone. The professor's eye stalk swiveled dismissively toward Quark. Even you. As the team dispersed, Quark frantically downloaded additional data packets into his personal information processor. His appendages trembled slightly as he reviewed statistics on something called a honey badger that Professor Krill had chosen for close observation. The professor had laughed at the creature's small size and seemingly comical appearance. Quark, however, noticed the creature's remarkably high aggression ratings and territorial defense patterns. He tried once more. Professor, perhaps we should reconsider the direct observation approach for certain species. Enough, junior researcher, Krill snapped. I've cataloged predators on gas giants that consume pure methane. I think I can handle a furry quadruped barely larger than a standard nutrition container. The research vessel's deployment bay hummed as the individual pods prepared for launch. Through the viewport, Earth's blue-green surface grew larger. From this distance, it looked deceptively peaceful. Quark strapped himself into his pod, double-checking the reinforced shields he'd secretly upgraded. He'd selected a remote northern forest for his observations. The database indicated the local moose were generally non-confrontational unless provoked. He hoped that would be true. Deployment sequence initiated, announced the ship's artificial intelligence. Research pods launching in 3, 2, 1. Quark watched through his pod's viewport as the team scattered toward Earth's surface. Each scientist confident in their superior evolutionary development and technological advantage over whatever primitive creatures awaited them. Only Quark carried a fully charged emergency teleporter and 3 different types of repellent sprays, just in case. Professor Krill's research pod touched down with pristine precision in the savanna region of what Earth's inhabitants called Africa. The climate regulation system in his environmental suit adjusted immediately to the scorching heat as he stepped out. Data collector in one appendage, Specimen container in another. Begin field notes, he dictated. This primitive ecosystem appears to function on embarrassingly straightforward predator-prey dynamics. I have selected a small carnivore called the honey badger for initial observation. According to the simplified database, it primarily consumes nectar-producing insects, clearly an evolutionary dead end in predator development. 5 kilometers away, behind a specially designed blind, Quark watched the professor's live feed with mounting horror. He activated his communication channel. Professor, that's not what honey badgers. Silence, junior researcher, came the immediate reply. I'm about to demonstrate proper field technique. Krill approached a small burrow where his scanners detected movement. Extending his specimen collection apparatus, he narrated confidently, "Note how easily I can approach. The creature likely has poor sensory development and..." The professor's commentary transformed into a shriek that overloaded the audio feed. Quark winced as he watched the honey badger emerge, not fleeing as the professor had predicted, but charging directly at the alien researcher with single-minded fury. The creature latched onto the professor's environmental suit with surprising force. "It's penetrating my exterior protection layers," Krill screamed. "How is this possible? Our materials withstand the vacuum of space." "Their jaws have evolved to break tortoise shells," Quark mumbled, knowing the professor couldn't hear him now as he fled in an undignified scramble back to his pod, the honey badger still attached to his posterior appendage. Across the planet, researcher Blorm's situation wasn't faring much better. His pod had landed in the northern Australian outback, and he'd immediately set out to document what he'd classified as obviously flightless, herbivorous avians. This specimen, he noted as he approached a large bird with brilliant blue-neck plumage, appears to be a primitive descendant of earlier reptilian species. Its brain capacity is likely minimal, making it an ideal first subject for. Blorm didn't finish his observation as the cassowary, recently separated from its chicks and already territorial, decided the strange creature with clicking appendages represented a threat. With a speed that defied Blorm's calculations, the bird charged, its dagger-like center toe raised in what Earth zoologists recognized as a disemboweling position. "Is that a vestigial claw? How fascinating, ah-hey-chay." Blorm's dignified scientific commentary dissolved into panicked clicks and whistles as he scrambled up a nearby tree, his exoskeleton barely intact. Meanwhile, Science Officer Zeem's aquatic research pod submerged into the waters off Australia's northern coast. Her gelatinous form rippled with anticipation. "Primitive saltwater environment," she noted calmly. "Preliminary scans indicate simple carbon-based life forms. I will now exit the pod to collect samples of local marine organisms." Unlike her colleagues, Zeem had taken the precaution of analyzing the water composition before exposure. What she hadn't accounted for was the nearly invisible box jellyfish drifting nearby. "What an elegantly simple invertebrate," she observed as her collection tentacle extended toward the creature. "Almost reminiscent of my own evolutionary ancestors from." Contact with the jellyfish's tentacles sent catastrophic electrical impulses through Zeem's gelatinous form. Her entire body convulsed as toxins designed to paralyze creatures 10 times her size coursed through her. Emergency. Emergency. Her automated system broadcast. Severe neurotoxin detected. Containment breach. In his northern forest location, Quark monitored all 3 disasters simultaneously on his multi-channel receiver. He sighed heavily while carefully scanning his surroundings for any sign of the massive antlered creatures his database had warned about. "And this," he muttered to his recording device, "is why we study the complete ecological profile before field observation." From his elevated observation post, the safety of a sturdy tree branch, Quark documented a family of wolves from a distance, using long-range scanning equipment rather than the immersive observation techniques his colleagues preferred. As night fell on his first day on Earth, Quark's communication system crackled with 3 separate distress signals, each more panicked than the last. Day 2 of Earth observation. Quark recorded quietly from his camouflaged position. "I've successfully avoided direct contact with local wildlife. The wolves exhibit complex social structures and hunting patterns far more sophisticated than our preliminary data suggested. I've maintained proper observation distance as per actual protocol. His communication device buzzed urgently. Professor Krill's voice came through, uncharacteristically hushed. Quark, are you monitoring? We have a situation. There are intelligent bipeds approaching my position. The database mentioned a dominant species, but I assumed they remained in their artificial structures. They're carrying image-capturing devices. Quark checked his planetary database. Those would be wildlife photographers, Professor. Human observers of their own ecosystem. I recommend immediate. They've spotted my pod. How is this possible? Our cloaking technology should be wait. Is that honey badger leading them here? That's impossible. The transmission cut off abruptly as Professor Krill apparently remembered the situation called for stealth. Quark shook his head and switched channels to check on Blorm. Completely unacceptable. Blorm was mid-rant. Some primitive primates have absconded with my molecular analyzer. Do you know how much that equipment costs? The Galactic Research Council will have my exoskeleton for this. In the background, Quark could hear what sounded like excited monkey screeches and the voices of human researchers calling to each other. The monkeys took your equipment to human conservationists? Quark asked incredulously. Worse, Blorm hissed. They're treating it like some kind of game. One monkey has my atmospheric sampler, another has my specimen collector, and they're playing with multi-million credit scientific instruments. A new alert flashed on Quark's communication panel, Zeem's emergency beacon. Her voice came through garbled and distorted. Mayday. My research pod has been ensnared in some primitive capture device, a network of fibrous restraints. I'm being hauled to the surface by humans in a water vessel. That's called a fishing net, Quark explained, trying to keep the exasperation from his voice. I mentioned in the mission briefing that humans harvest marine organisms for sustenance and... They're pointing at me, making excited vocalizations. One is holding a rectangular device that emits quick bursts of light. That would be a camera phone. Quark sighed. They think they've discovered a new species. Quark's own situation, while less immediately dire, was growing complicated. A human female wearing khaki clothing and carrying binoculars had been methodically sweeping the forest where he was hidden. Unlike his colleagues, Quark had actually engaged his pod's cloaking technology correctly and selected appropriate camouflage for his observation suit. Still, the human moved with surprising purpose, almost as if she sensed something unusual in her forest. Several times she had looked directly at Quark's position before continuing her search. According to his database, she appeared to be something called a dedicated bird watcher, apparently a human who derives satisfaction from locating and identifying avian species. The remarkable thing about humans, Quark dictated quietly into his personal log, isn't their physical capabilities, which are frankly unimpressive, but their persistent curiosity. They seem compelled to investigate, document, and interfere with every aspect of their ecosystem for reasons ranging from scientific study to simple amusement. He paused as the bird watcher below froze, staring intently into the branches near his position. Unlike most dominant species on cataloged planets, he continued even more quietly, humans appear to have maintained a complex relationship with their world's wildlife. They simultaneously fear, worship, protect, study, consume, and coexist with other species in patterns that defy simple categorization. The woman below suddenly raised her binoculars directly toward him. Quark held perfectly still, trusting his camouflage. Most concerning, he whispered after she finally moved on, they exhibit an alarming tendency to approach rather than flee from the unknown. This behavioral trait alone would warrant caution in any future interactions. This is Junior Researcher Quark attempting to establish contact with any expedition members. Please respond. Static answered his call as Quark crouched beneath a fallen log. Night had fallen on his third day on Earth, and the situation had deteriorated from scientific embarrassment to potential diplomatic disaster. Professor Krill's last transmission had been a breathless account of activating his emergency beacon, only to discover that the high-frequency pulses it emitted apparently attracted vast swarms of blood-drinking insects called mosquitoes. His subsequent dash through the savannah had led him directly into a wildlife photography tour group, resulting in what the professor described as hundreds of documentation images, now circulating on the human's global information network. Quark had lost contact with him shortly after that. Researcher Blorm's situation had somehow worsened. After failing to recover his equipment from the monkeys, he'd attempted to retreat to his pod, only to be spotted by conservation officers. Mistaking him for an exotic animal trafficker in an unusual costume, they had pursued him into a wildlife sanctuary. Blorm's last message indicated he was hiding in some kind of artificial water feature surrounded by flamingos, which he described as judgmental pink monstrosities. Science Officer Zeem had perhaps fared worst of all. Her research pod, with her still inside, had been transported to a marine research facility. Her increasingly panicked transmissions described human scientists tapping on her containment walls, taking tissue samples, and debating whether she represented a new species of cephalopod or some heretofore undiscovered deep-sea organism. "They keep offering me deceased fish parts," she had whispered frantically in her last communication. "And one of them, I believe a juvenile human, keeps making faces at me through the transparent barrier." Quark's own predicament had grown more complicated. The bird watcher, whose name he had determined was Maggie based on her communications with other humans, had become convinced that a rare species was hiding in this section of forest. She had set up a blind and now sat patiently with recording equipment, waiting for Quark to reveal himself. A3 emergency log update, Quark whispered into his recorder. "The research team is scattered, compromised, and in various states of containment or pursuit. The mothership is maintaining standard orbit and will not initiate emergency extraction without confirmation from Professor Krill, who is currently unavailable due to being chased by wildlife photographers through a hippopotamus wallow." A twig snapped nearby, and Quark froze. Maggie's voice came softly through the darkness. "I know you're there," she called. "I've never heard a call pattern like yours before. Is it a new owl species? Or maybe a visitor from another migration route?" Quark remained perfectly still, his camouflage technology struggling to adapt to the moonlight filtering through the trees. "Critical mission failure appears imminent," he continued in a barely audible whisper. "The simple observation mission has become a potential first contact scenario with a species that was supposed to be preoccupied with their own affairs. If I cannot extract my colleagues within the next planetary rotation cycle, we risk violating multiple Galactic Research Council protocols regarding non-interference." "There you are," Maggie suddenly exclaimed, her flashlight beam illuminating Quark's position. For a moment, human and alien stared at each other in mutual shock. Then Quark did the only logical thing. He activated his short-distance teleporter and materialized 50 meters away, leaving Maggie blinking at the empty space where an alien researcher had been a moment before. Her excited voice faded behind him as he ran. "Wait, come back. I need to document this for the Audubon Society." "This is Junior Researcher Quark initiating Operation Extraction," Quark announced into his communicator as he piloted his small research pod low over the Australian outback. "Current Earth time 0200 hours, all expedition members requiring immediate evacuation." After 3 days of escalating chaos, Quark had finally convinced the mothership's AI that an emergency protocol override was necessary, even without Professor Krill's authorization. Now he had 12 hours to collect his scattered colleagues before the ship would initiate an emergency departure with or without the research team on board. His first target, researcher Blorm, whose tracking signal emanated from a wildlife sanctuary outside of Perth. Quark's pod touched down silently on the sanctuary grounds, its cloaking technology finally functioning as intended now that he had recalibrated it. "Blorm, can you hear me?" Quark whispered into his communicator as he crept past sleeping flamingos. A pathetic series of clicks came from inside a decorative pond surrounded by tropical plants. Quark found Blorm huddled beneath a lily pad, his exoskeleton covered in algae. "They have motion sensors and night vision technology," Blorm hissed as Quark helped him from the water. "Every time I try to leave, alarms sound. How do they have such advanced security for simple wildlife observation?" "It's to prevent poaching," Quark explained, hustling his colleague toward the pod. Humans are simultaneously the greatest threat and the greatest protectors of their planet's biodiversity. It's fascinating, actually. Less anthropological analysis, more extraction. Blorm interrupted, his eye stalk swiveling nervously. They were halfway to the pod when floodlights suddenly illuminated the sanctuary grounds. A security guard's voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "This is a protected facility. We have you on camera. Stay where you are. Run." Quark shouted, abandoning scientific dignity as they sprinted for the pod. Behind them, the guard's professional demeanor faltered as he caught sight of their alien forms. "What in the are those costumes? Is this for YouTube?" Safely aboard the pod and rocketing skyward, Blorm collapsed into his containment seat. "Never again," he chittered. "Never again will I volunteer for field research." Next stop, the marine research facility where Zeem was being held. This extraction proved more challenging, requiring Quark to create a diversion with his pod's external systems while he infiltrated the laboratory, where Zeem's container was being studied. "They've been testing my cellular structure," Zeem burbled indignantly as Quark helped her gelatinous form into a portable containment unit. "One of them suggested I might be a new form of sentient slime mold." "At least they recognized your sentience," Quark offered, ducking beneath a security camera. Their escape triggered multiple alarms, causing panicked marine biologists to rush into the hallway. One pointed at them, eyes wide. "The specimen is escaping, and it has an accomplice." "Not a specimen." Zeem pulsed angrily from her containment unit. "I have 3 advanced degrees in xenobiology." Their retreat to the pod was nearly blocked by security guards until Quark had the inspired idea to release several lobsters from their tanks. The resulting chaos allowed them to slip outside to where the pod waited. Professor Krill proved the most difficult extraction. His signal led Quark to a safari tour camp where the professor had been cornered by a combination of fascinated tourists, professional photographers, and one particularly determined honey badger that seemed to hold a grudge. "There it is again," a tourist shouted as Quark's pod descended. "I told you I wasn't making it up. 2 aliens. This planet is a death trap." Professor Krill wailed as he sprinted toward the pod, dignity entirely abandoned. "Nothing here makes ecological sense. The herbivores are aggressive. The carnivores hold grudges. Even the plants tried to poison me." Their escape from the safari camp became complicated when a tour jeep gave chase, filled with tourists recording with their phones. Quark was forced to execute a series of aerial maneuvers that left Professor Krill clinging to his containment harness and moaning about certification violations. The final obstacle came during their ascent to the mothership. Air traffic control detected their pod, despite its cloaking technology. "Unidentified aircraft, you are in restricted airspace," came a stern voice over their communication system. "Identify yourself immediately." Quark thought quickly, then adjusted his voice modulator to approximate human speech patterns. "This is experimental drone test flight November Echo Romeo Delta, experiencing technical difficulties. Returning to Area 51 immediately." There was a long pause before air traffic control responded. "Roger that, November Echo Romeo Delta. He advised we're logging this incident." As they docked with the mothership, Professor Krill finally regained enough composure to address Quark. "Junior researcher," he said, his voice uncharacteristically humble, "it appears your preparation for this mission was more thorough than my own." Quark simply nodded as the mothership's engines powered up, preparing to leave Earth's orbit. Through the viewport, the blue-green planet receded, looking deceptively peaceful once again. Part 6, the report. Esteemed members of the Galactic Research Council, I present the findings of Earth Expedition 774. Junior researcher Quark, now promoted to senior researcher following the expedition, stood confidently before the semicircular table where the Council's 12 members waited expectantly. Behind him, Professor Krill, researcher Blorm, and Science Officer Zeem sat in silent support, still showing visible signs of their Earth encounters. Professor Krill's eye stalks remained partially retracted, a sign of ongoing trauma in their species. Blorm's exoskeleton bore several repaired cracks, and a patch of his surface still carried a strange pink coloration from the flamingo pond. Zeem's gelatinous form occasionally pulsed with involuntary contractions, an after-effect of the box jellyfish toxin. Our preliminary classification of Earth as a standard Class 3 life-bearing planet was, Quark paused dramatically, catastrophically incorrect. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber as Quark activated the holographic display. Images of Earth's diverse ecosystems and wildlife appeared in the center of the room. While technologically limited and relatively isolated in their galactic sector, Earth demonstrates unprecedented biological diversity with extreme adaptation characteristics. What makes Earth unique in our catalog systems is not the presence of the dominant bipedal species humans, but rather the bewildering variety and lethality of what humans consider ordinary wildlife. The display shifted to footage from Professor Krill's encounter with the honey badger. Several council members flinched. This small mammal, Quark explained, exhibits aggression levels that statistically should be impossible for its size. It routinely attacks creatures 10 times its mass and has been documented successfully repelling apex predators. More footage played. Blorm fleeing from the cassowary, Zeem's containment breach after contact with the jellyfish. Earth's evolutionary pattern has produced creatures with defense and attack capabilities that defy conventional ecological modeling, Quark continued. Venoms that can stop cardiovascular systems in seconds. Microorganisms that dissolve foreign matter. Herbivores that have developed defensive capabilities that would be excessive even on military worlds. The council chairperson leaned forward. And the dominant species? These humans? Quark nodded gravely. Herein lies Earth's most puzzling aspect. Humans appear to have evolved, not by dominating their ecosystem through superior physical attributes they possess none, but by developing an unprecedented relationship with their world's dangers. The display showed humans engaging with wildlife, conservation efforts, research facilities, wildlife photography, zoos, sanctuaries. Humans simultaneously fear, respect, protect, study, and coexist with creatures that could easily kill them. They create protected spaces for species whose sole evolutionary purpose appears to be causing pain to other organisms. They keep venomous creatures as companion animals. They deliberately seek out and document predators that view them as prey. Professor Krill stood shakily. I was pursued by wildlife photographers who were more concerned with photographing a honey badger than with their own safety. The creature was actively attacking me, yet they appeared, excited by this development. Blorm clicked his mandibles nervously. The primate species stole our advanced technology, and instead of fleeing from the unfamiliar objects, the human researchers attempted to retrieve them not out of technological interest, but to protect the primates from potential harm. Zeem pulsed in agreement. They captured my research pod and immediately began scientific documentation. Their curiosity overrode even basic safety protocols. The council chairperson's expression darkened. Your recommendation, Senior Researcher Quark? Classification of Earth as an extreme hazard zone, with immediate quarantine protocols enacted, Quark stated firmly. Not because humans represent a threat to galactic stability, though their curiosity makes them potentially problematic, but because Earth itself represents perhaps the most dangerous collection of evolved organisms in known space. He gestured to his traumatized colleagues. Our team consisted of experienced researchers with advanced technological protection, and yet Earth's wildlife nearly claimed them all. More concerning, humans not only survive in this environment, they actively celebrate and preserve its dangers. The council deliberated briefly before the chairperson announced their decision. Earth is hereby classified as quarantined under Protocol Extreme Hazard. No further research expeditions authorized without full council approval and military escort. As they exited the chamber, Professor Krill approached Quark privately. There's one question you didn't address in the report, Quark. Are humans themselves dangerous? Quark considered this carefully before responding. Not inherently, Professor. But consider, this is a species that evolved on a planet where everything from microbes to mammals developed extreme methods of killing. Instead of exterminating these threats, humans study them, protect them, and keep them as pets. They swim with predators for recreation. They handle venomous creatures for entertainment. He shuddered slightly. Any species that not only survives but thrives in such an environment and then develops spacefaring technology, well, perhaps we should be grateful they haven't yet developed interstellar travel. Professor Krill's eye stalks retracted even further. So the quarantine is not to protect the galaxy from Earth, Quark finished quietly, but to protect the galaxy from a species insane enough to consider Earth's most deadly inhabitants worthy of conservation and study, rather than eradication. In the vast display hall of the Galactic Research Institute, a new holographic warning now rotated slowly above Earth's entry. Approach with extreme caution. Contains honey badgers. In much smaller text beneath, and humans who think they're cute.